Elena Rodriguez had never imagined her life would come to this, running through a blizzard in the middle of nowhere, her lungs burning with every frozen breath, her legs shaking from exhaustion. Behind her, somewhere in that wall of white snow, men were hunting her like an animal. 6 months ago, she was just an accountant in Denver. She had a decent apartment, a cat named Whiskers, and a routine that made sense. She'd go to work, crunch numbers, help small businesses keep their books straight, and feel good about doing honest work. Her parents had immigrated from Mexico when she was 5, working 2 jobs each so she could go to college. Being an accountant wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. It was respectable. It made her parents proud. Then everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon in April. She'd been working late at the office, finishing up quarterly reports for her boss, David Chen. David owned a mid-sized accounting firm that handled books for restaurants, construction companies, and a few medical clinics around the city. He was always professional, always fair with her salary, and seemed like a decent guy who built his business from scratch. That Tuesday, Elena needed to access an old file from David's computer. He'd left for the day, but he'd given her his password months ago for situations just like this. She logged in, searched for the file she needed, and that's when she saw it. A folder labeled RC Holdings Private. She shouldn't have clicked it. She knew that later, lying awake at night, replaying that moment over and over. But something made her curious. RC Holdings was one of their biggest clients, paying premium fees for what should have been simple bookkeeping work. Inside that folder, Elena found spreadsheets that made her blood run cold. Millions of dollars flowing through shell companies. Money coming in from sources that made no sense. Cash deposits that violated every financial regulation she'd ever studied. And payments going out to people with titles like security consultant and logistics coordinator for amounts that could buy houses. Elena wasn't naive. She knew exactly what she was looking at. Money laundering. And not small-time stuff either. This was organized, sophisticated, and involved amounts that meant serious criminal enterprise. Her hands had trembled as she copied the files to a USB drive. She didn't know what she'd do with them yet, but every instinct told her to have proof, to have something that proved she wasn't imagining things. The next day, she'd called the FBI hotline. The woman who answered had been kind, professional, and told Elena that someone would contact her within 48 hours. Elena felt relief wash over her. She was doing the right thing. The system would handle this. 48 hours later, 2 police detectives showed up at her apartment. They said they were following up on her report. They asked her questions that seemed off somehow. Too focused on what she'd seen, where she'd stored the information, who else she'd told. When they asked her to hand over the USB drive for evidence, something in their eyes made her lie. She told them she'd destroyed it, got scared, decided not to get involved. After they left, Elena knew she'd made the right call. Those weren't men interested in justice. Those were men interested in protecting something, or someone. The next week, her apartment was broken into. Nothing valuable was taken, but everything was searched. Drawers dumped out, closets torn apart, her laptop missing, and on her bathroom mirror written in red lipstick, "Mind your business." That's when Elena realized how deep the corruption went. That's when she understood that reporting it through normal channels had painted a target on her back. That's when she started running. She'd withdrawn cash, ditched her cell phone, and left Denver in a 15-year-old Honda Civic she bought off Craigslist for $2,000. She drove north into Wyoming, then cut west toward Idaho, constantly looking in her rearview mirror. She stayed in cheap motels, paid cash for everything, and tried to figure out what to do next. For 3 months, she moved from town to town. She picked up occasional work cleaning houses or waiting tables for cash under the table. She kept her head down. She changed her appearance, cutting her long black hair short and dyeing it brown. She wore glasses even though her vision was fine. But they found her anyway. She'd been staying in a small town in Montana, working at a diner when she saw him. One of the detectives who'd come to her apartment. He was sitting in a booth watching her. When their eyes met, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said, "We know exactly where you are." Elena left her apron on the counter and walked straight out the back door. She got in her Honda and drove. She didn't pack. She didn't go back to her rented room. She just drove. That was 2 days ago. She'd been heading for the Canadian border, thinking maybe she could disappear across the border, start completely over. But the Honda, old and tired, started making terrible noises as she climbed into the Rocky Mountains of northern Montana. Smoke began pouring from under the hood. She managed to pull over before it died completely, but she was stranded on a remote mountain road with snow starting to fall. She'd grabbed her backpack with her few belongings, the USB drive she'd kept hidden in the lining, and started walking. Maybe she could make it to the next town. Maybe someone would give her a ride. Maybe she could find a gas station with a phone. Then she saw the headlights behind her. 2 vehicles, moving slowly up the mountain road, searching, hunting. Elena had run into the forest, her sneakers immediately soaking through in the deep snow. The temperature was dropping fast. The snow was coming down harder. She could hear men's voices calling to each other, organizing a search. She ran until her legs felt like they'd give out. She ran until she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. She ran until the voices faded behind her. But she knew they'd keep coming. They'd invested too much time, too much effort. Whatever organization David was working for, they couldn't let her live with what she knew. The world had turned into a nightmare of white. Snow everywhere, trees casting dark shadows, the wind howling through the mountains like something alive and angry. Elena's jacket wasn't meant for this kind of weather. Her jeans were soaked through. Ice was forming on her eyelashes. She was going to die out here. That thought kept circling through her mind. Not killed by bounty hunters or corrupt cops. Just frozen to death on a mountain because she'd tried to do the right thing. Then through the driving snow she saw it. A dark shape that didn't belong. A structure. A building. Elena stumbled toward it, barely believing her eyes. It was a cabin. Small, made of logs, tucked into the trees like it was hiding from the world. There were no lights on inside. No smoke from the chimney. No vehicles around. She tried the door. Locked. She pounded on it, calling out, but no one answered. The wind was picking up, and she could see her breath forming clouds of white in the air. Her whole body was shaking now, not just from fear, but from the cold working its way into her bones. A window. There was a window on the side of the cabin. Elena picked up a rock and smashed it. The sound of breaking glass seemed impossibly loud, but she was beyond caring. She reached through, unlocked it from the inside, and pulled herself through, tumbling onto a wooden floor. Inside it was dark and cold, but at least she was out of the wind. Elena lay there for a moment, her body shaking violently. She needed to move, needed to get warm, needed to do something before hypothermia set in. She pulled herself up and felt along the walls until she found what felt like a table. On it she found matches. Miracle. She struck one, and in its brief light she saw a fireplace, wood stacked beside it, kerosene lamps on a shelf. With shaking hands, Elena lit a lamp. The cabin flickered into view. It was simple but well-maintained. One room with a bed in the corner, a table and chairs, shelves with canned goods and supplies. Someone lived here, or at least used this place regularly. She built a fire the way her father had taught her on camping trips when she was young, small kindling first, then larger pieces. She coaxed it to life, feeding it carefully until flames were crackling and throwing heat into the room. Elena dragged a heavy wooden dresser in front of the door. Then she did the same with the broken window, blocking it with the mattress from the bed. It wasn't much security, but maybe it would slow someone down. Maybe it would buy her time. She found blankets and wrapped herself in them, sitting as close to the fire as she could without burning herself. Feeling was coming back to her fingers and toes, and with it came pain, sharp stabbing pain that made her gasp. But pain meant she wasn't frozen. Pain meant she was still alive. Outside she could hear engines in the distance, vehicles moving slowly along the road. They were still searching, still hunting. Elena added more wood to the fire and looked around the cabin. Whoever owned this place, they kept it stocked. There was enough food here to last weeks, enough firewood to keep warm. Maybe, just maybe, she could hide here until the storm passed, until the hunters gave up and moved on. She found a can of soup and heated it over the fire. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Warm. Real. She ate it slowly, feeling strength returning to her body, but exhaustion was catching up with her. The adrenaline that had kept her running was fading. Her eyes kept closing even though she tried to stay alert. She needed to keep watch. Needed to stay ready in case they found the cabin. Elena curled up near the fire, wrapped in blankets, telling herself she'd just rest for a few minutes. Just close her eyes for a moment. She was asleep before she could finish the thought. She didn't hear the storm intensify outside, the wind howling like wolves. She didn't hear the snow piling up against the walls, burying the cabin deeper into the mountain. She didn't hear the footsteps on the porch hours later, or the door being pushed against the dresser she'd barricaded it with. Elena Rodriguez slept the sleep of the utterly exhausted, not knowing that when she woke up, her life was about to change again, not knowing that the owner of this cabin was standing over her, deciding whether she was a threat or someone who needed help, not knowing that she'd just met the man who would change everything. Elena woke up to find a man standing over her. Her eyes snapped open, and for a second she couldn't process what she was seeing. A huge figure blocking the firelight, broad shoulders, a thick beard, eyes studying her with an intensity that made her heart stop. She scrambled backward, tangling in the blankets, reaching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her hand closed around a piece of firewood. "Easy," the man said, his voice deep but calm. He held up both hands, showing they were empty. "You're safe." "I'm not going to hurt you." Elena's breath came in short gasps. Her mind raced through possibilities. Was he with them? Had they sent him? But something about him didn't fit. He wore heavy winter gear, practical and worn. His boots were caked with snow. He didn't look like a bounty hunter or a cop. He looked like someone who belonged in these mountains. "This is my cabin," he said, still keeping his distance. "I've been out checking my trap lines. Came back to find my window broken and someone sleeping by my fire." Elena's grip on the firewood loosened slightly. "I'm sorry. I was freezing. I didn't know what else to do." The man's expression softened a bit. He moved slowly to the side, giving her space, and added wood to the fire. In the better light, Elena could see him more clearly. He was probably in his early 40s, weathered face, gray streaking through his dark beard. But his movements were careful, controlled. There was something military about the way he carried himself. "You're lucky you found this place," he said. "Temperature dropped to 10 below last night. You wouldn't have lasted an hour out there." He glanced at her hands. "Let me see your fingers." Elena hesitated, but he'd already seen she was in trouble. She held out her hands. They were red and swollen, some fingers with the waxy white patches she knew meant frostbite. The man knelt down beside her, and Elena tensed, but he just examined her hands with a gentle touch that surprised her. "Not too bad. You got warm fast enough, but we need to treat these properly." He stood and went to a cabinet, pulling out a first aid kit that looked serious and well-stocked. He worked in silence for a few minutes, treating her fingers with ointment and wrapping them carefully. His hands were rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. When he finished, he handed her a bottle of water. "Drink slowly." "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday. I had some soup from your supplies. I'm sorry, I'll pay you back, I just—" "Doesn't matter," he interrupted. "You needed it." He stood and walked to the small kitchen area, pulling out a pot and ingredients. "I'm Jake Morrison." "And you are?" Elena paused. Should she give her real name? But lying seemed pointless now. "Elena Rodriguez." Jake started making something on the propane stove. The smell of cooking food made Elena's stomach growl loudly. He didn't comment on it, just kept working. "So, Elena Rodriguez," Jake said without turning around. "What's a woman doing wandering through a blizzard in the Rockies with no proper gear and no car in sight?" Elena's mind raced. How much should she tell him? But as she watched Jake cooking, something about his steady presence made her want to be honest. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was because he'd already helped her without asking questions. "I'm running from some people," she said quietly. Jake nodded like this wasn't surprising. Figured it was something like that. The way you barricaded the door, the way you jumped when you woke up. He brought over a bowl of oatmeal with dried fruit mixed in. "Eat this. Then, if you want to talk about it, we'll talk. If you don't, that's fine too." Elena took the bowl with her bandaged hands and ate. It was simple food, but it tasted incredible. Real, warm, safe. She hadn't felt safe in so long that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Jake sat at the table drinking coffee from a metal cup. He didn't stare at her or pressure her. He just waited, patient like he had all the time in the world. "I'm an accountant," Elena finally said. "Was an accountant. I found out my boss was laundering money for some kind of criminal organization. A lot of money. When I tried to report it, I realized the police were involved too. Corrupt. Working with them. Jake's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. And now they're hunting you. They sent bounty hunters. Or maybe they are bounty hunters, I don't know anymore. All I know is they won't stop until they find me. Elena set down the empty bowl. I saw headlights on the road last night. I ran into the forest and kept running until I found your cabin. How long have you been running? 6 months. I've been all over. Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. But they keep finding me somehow. Elena felt tears threatening but pushed them back. She was tired of crying, tired of being scared. I'm sorry I broke into your cabin. I'll leave as soon as the storm clears. You needed shelter, Jake finished, and you found it. You're not going anywhere in this weather anyway. Storm's supposed to last another few days according to the radio. Elena looked up at him. You're not going to turn me in? Call someone? Jake gave a short laugh, but there wasn't much humor in it. I live in these mountains for a reason. I'm not a fan of corrupt systems or people who abuse power. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the wall of white. I was a Marine. Did 3 tours overseas. Saw good people die because contractors cut corners for profit. Saw officers look the other way because they were getting paid off. When I came home, I tried to report it through proper channels. He turned back to face her. Nobody wanted to hear it. The system protected itself. Closed ranks. Made me out to be unstable, PTSD, disgruntled, all the words they used to discredit someone. His voice was flat, factual, like he'd made peace with it long ago. So I came here. Built this cabin. Live on my terms. I don't bother anyone and they don't bother me. Elena felt something shift inside her. Understanding. Recognition. You know what it's like. To try to do the right thing and have it turn against you. Yeah, Jake said quietly. I know exactly what it's like. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside. Elena felt some of the tension leaving her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. At least for now, she'd found someone who understood. You should rest more, Jake said eventually. You're exhausted. I can see it. Take the bed. I'll keep watch. I can't take your bed. You can and you will. You're recovering from hypothermia and frostbite. I've slept in worse places than a chair by the fire. His tone left no room for argument. Elena was too tired to fight. She made her way to the bed and lay down. The mattress felt like heaven after days of sleeping in her car or cheap motels. But even as exhaustion pulled at her, she couldn't quite relax. Jake? She called out. Yeah? Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I could be lying about everything. Jake was quiet for a moment. You could be. But I don't think you are. I've learned to read people pretty well out here. And you've got the look of someone who's been running on fear and adrenaline for too long. He paused. Besides, sometimes helping someone is the only way to remember you're still human. Elena closed her eyes and let herself sleep. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of peace. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, Elena felt safer than she had in months. Jake kept the fire going, cooked simple but good meals, and gave her space when she needed it. He taught her things without making it feel like teaching. How to properly bank a fire so it would last through the night. How to melt snow for water. How to read the weather by watching the way the wind moved through the trees. These were survival skills, she realized. Things he thought she might need. They talked more, too. Elena learned that Jake had been living in these mountains for 8 years. He trapped animals for fur in the winter, foraged and hunted in the summer. He hiked into the nearest town once a month for supplies he couldn't make or catch himself. It was a hard life, he admitted, but it was honest. Nobody owned him. Nobody could betray him. The mountains didn't lie. Elena told him about her parents, how proud they'd been when she graduated college. How hard they'd worked so she could have opportunities they never had. How ashamed she felt that doing the right thing had made her a fugitive. You didn't do anything wrong, Jake said firmly. They did. You just exposed it. That's not shame. That's courage. On the 3rd day, the storm began to ease. The wind died down. The snow fell more gently. Jake was outside clearing snow from the cabin when Elena saw it through the window. Movement in the trees. Her blood went cold. She moved away from the window and grabbed Jake's arm when he came back inside. Someone's out there. I saw them in the trees. Jake's expression hardened instantly. He moved to the window and looked out carefully, not exposing himself. How many? I don't know. I just saw movement. Jake went to a closet and pulled out a hunting rifle. Not to threaten her, Elena realized, but to defend them both. Stay away from the windows. Get in the corner by the fireplace. Elena's heart was pounding. They'd found her. Even here, in the middle of nowhere, they'd found her. There was a knock at the door, not a friendly knock. A hard, demanding knock. Jake Morrison, a voice called from outside. We know you're in there. We just want to talk. Jake moved to the door but didn't open it. Who are you and what do you want? My name is Victor Kane. I'm a private investigator. I'm looking for a woman named Elena Rodriguez. She's wanted for questioning in a criminal matter. We have reason to believe she might have sought shelter here during the storm. Jake glanced back at Elena, then called out, Don't know anyone by that name. Come on, Morrison. We tracked her footprints from the road. They lead right to your cabin. Just open the door. We can make this easy. Elena felt panic rising. They were trapped. Jake was outnumbered. She couldn't let him get hurt because of her. But Jake's voice was steady when he spoke again. Private investigator, you said? Show me some credentials. Slide them under the door. There was a pause. Then Victor's voice harder now. We don't have time for games. Open the door or we'll open it for you. Jake checked his rifle. When he spoke, his voice had changed. It wasn't the gentle tone he'd used with Elena. It was the voice of someone who'd been in combat. Someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. Here's how this is going to work. You're on my property without permission. This is Montana, which means I'm well within my rights to defend it. The woman you're looking for isn't here. But even if she was, I wouldn't hand anyone over to men who hunt people through blizzards without proper identification. He chambered around. You've got 30 seconds to get off my land. Victor laughed. You're outnumbered, Morrison. There are 3 of us and 1 of you. Don't be stupid. I'm not the one standing in the open, Jake replied. I've got cover, high ground advantage, and a rifle I know how to use. You want to test me? Go ahead. But I guarantee someone's going home in a body bag, and it won't be me. There was a long silence outside. Elena could hear voices talking in low tones, arguing. Then Victor spoke again. This isn't over. She can't hide up here forever. When she comes down, we'll be waiting. You do that, Jake said. They heard footsteps crunching through snow, moving away. But Jake didn't relax. He kept watching out the window until the men were out of sight. Then he turned to Elena. His expression was serious. They'll be back. Probably with more men. We need to leave. What? No, I can't ask you to do that. This is your home. It's a cabin, Jake said. And it's not worth your life or mine. I know these mountains better than they ever will. There's an old ranger station about 15 miles from here. It's abandoned, but it's defensible. We can make it there if we move fast. Elena felt tears in her eyes. You're really going to help me? Even after this? Jake was already gathering supplies, moving with military efficiency. I already made my choice when I let you stay. I'm not changing it now. He looked at her directly. Besides, I haven't had a mission in 8 years. Maybe it's time I remembered what I'm good at. What's that? Jake handed her a backpack filled with supplies. Protecting people who can't protect themselves. He pulled on his heavy coat. Get dressed. Warm layers. We leave in 10 minutes. As Elena prepared to leave the cabin that had saved her life, she looked at Jake and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't going to die on this mountain after all. Maybe she'd found something even more valuable than shelter. She'd found an ally. The cold hit Elena like a physical wall when they stepped outside. Even with the extra layers Jake had given her, even with proper boots and gloves, the mountain air was brutal. It burned her lungs with every breath. Jake moved ahead of her, breaking trail through the deep snow. He'd strapped snowshoes to both their feet, which helped, but Elena still struggled. Every step felt like lifting weights. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached, and they'd barely gone a quarter mile. How far did you say the ranger station was? Elena gasped. 15 miles, Jake called back without stopping. We need to make good time while the weather holds. Another storm's coming in tonight. 15 miles. Elena wanted to cry. She'd never hiked 15 miles in her life, let alone through snow and freezing temperatures while being hunted by dangerous men. But she didn't complain. Jake was risking everything for her. The least she could do was keep up. They walked for hours. Jake set a steady pace, not too fast, but never stopping for long. Every 20 minutes, he'd pause to let Elena catch her breath and scan the area behind them. He was watching for pursuit, Elena realized. making sure they weren't being followed. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Tall pines weighed down with snow, mountains rising all around them like the walls of a frozen fortress. The sun glinted off the white surface, so bright it hurt to look at. Elena had never felt so small, so insignificant. The wilderness didn't care if she lived or died. It just existed, ancient and indifferent. "You doing okay?" Jake asked during one of their brief stops. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her face was numb from the cold despite the scarf wrapped around it. Her feet felt like blocks of ice, but she was still moving. "Still alive?" "We're making good progress," Jake said, offering her water from a canteen. "You're tougher than you look." "I don't feel tough," Elena admitted. "I feel like I'm about to collapse." "Tough isn't about not feeling it," Jake said. "It's about keeping going anyway. And you're doing that," he pointed ahead. "See that ridge? Once we cross that, we're halfway there." Elena looked at the ridge. It seemed impossibly far away, but she nodded and kept walking. As they climbed, Jake taught her things. How to step to save energy, how to use her whole foot instead of just pushing with her toes, how to breathe in rhythm with her steps. He'd been a Marine, Elena remembered. He'd probably marched with a full pack in worse conditions than this. "Where did you serve?" Elena asked, partly to distract herself from the burning in her legs. "Afghanistan, Iraq, some places that aren't on any official record." Jake's voice was matter-of-fact. "Did what they asked me to do. Lost friends. Made decisions I still think about." He glanced back at her. "But I learned how to survive. How to keep moving when everything in you wants to quit. That's what you're doing now." They reached the ridge by early afternoon. Elena felt a surge of accomplishment, but it died quickly when she looked at what lay ahead. More mountains, more forest, more endless white snow. "How do you know where you're going?" she asked. Everything looked the same to her. Jake pointed to landmarks. "That peak with the split top. The way this valley curves. I've hiked these mountains for 8 years. I know them better than most people know their own neighborhood." He started down the other side. "Come on, we need to keep moving." The descent was almost worse than the climb. Elena's knees protested with every step. She slipped twice, catching herself before she fell. Jake was always there, steady, offering a hand when she needed it but letting her do the work herself. As they entered a dense section of forest, Jake suddenly held up his hand. Elena froze. He stood perfectly still, listening. Then Elena heard it too. The distant sound of engines, snowmobiles. "They're searching the area," Jake whispered. "Probably think we're heading straight down the mountain toward civilization. But we're not." He changed direction, leading them deeper into the trees. "Stay close. Keep quiet." They moved carefully now, Jake choosing their path with precision. He avoided open areas, kept them in the shadows, used the terrain to hide their tracks. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. The sound of the engines grew louder, then faded, then grew loud again. The hunters were crisscrossing the area, covering ground fast on their machines. Jake led Elena into a small ravine and motioned for her to get down. They crouched behind a fallen log, barely breathing. The sound of a snowmobile came so close Elena could hear the driver talking on a radio. "Nothing in Sector 3. Moving to Sector 4. The engine roared past, so near that Elena could have reached out and touched it. She pressed herself against the log, her whole body shaking. Not from cold this time, from pure terror. Jake's hand found hers and squeezed. Steady. Calm. He wasn't scared. Or if he was, he didn't show it. They waited until the sound faded completely. Even then, Jake made them wait another 10 minutes before moving. "That was too close," Elena whispered. "They're not tracking us. They're guessing." Jake helped her up. "But we need to be smarter. They've got speed. We've got knowledge. We use that advantage." They continued, but now Jake took a more complex route. He doubled back several times, walked them through streams even though the water was ice cold, chose paths that were harder but would hide their tracks better. It was exhausting, but Elena understood. They couldn't leave an obvious trail. By late afternoon, Elena was beyond tired. She was running on pure willpower. Every muscle screamed. Her feet were blistered inside her boots. She wanted nothing more than to lie down in the snow and sleep. But Jake kept her moving with encouragement and the occasional story. He told her about his first winter in the mountains, how he'd almost given up a dozen times, about the elk he'd tracked for 3 days before finally seeing it, about the morning he'd woken to find a bear outside his cabin, and had to wait 4 hours for it to leave. "Why do you stay out here?" Elena asked. "It's so hard. So lonely." Jake was quiet for a while. "At first I stayed because I was angry. At the system. At the people who betrayed us. At myself for trusting them." He navigated around a steep drop. "But after a while I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was at peace. The mountains don't lie to you. They don't pretend to be something they're not. They're hard, but they're honest. I guess I needed that honesty." Elena understood that. She'd spent 6 months surrounded by lies and corruption. There was something clean about this brutal wilderness, something real. As the sun started to set, painting the snow orange and pink, Elena saw something that made her stumble. A cliff face ahead of them, steep and treacherous. "We have to climb that?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Just part way," Jake said. "There's a ledge about 20 feet up. We'll shelter there for the night. It's defensible and they won't see us from below." Elena wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She followed Jake to the base of the cliff and watched as he found handholds and footholds that seemed invisible to her. "Your turn," he called down. "Take your time. Test every grip before you put your weight on it." Elena had never rock climbed in her life. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the first hold. The rock was cold and rough against her palms. She pulled herself up, found a foothold, reached for the next grip. "Don't look down," she told herself. "Just keep climbing." Halfway up, her foot slipped. Elena gasped, clinging to the rock face with her fingers, scrabbling for purchase. Her heart felt like it would explode. "You're okay." Jake's voice came from above, steady and calm. "Left foot. There's a ledge 6 inches to your left." Elena felt with her foot and found it. Solid rock. She pushed herself up. "Good. Now right hand. Straight up." She climbed with Jake guiding her, talking her through each move. When she finally pulled herself onto the ledge, she collapsed, shaking. "You did it," Jake said, and there was pride in his voice. "First time climbing and you made it up a 20-foot face. That's impressive." Elena looked back down and immediately regretted it. The ground seemed impossibly far away. "I can't believe I just did that." "You'd be surprised what you can do when you have to." Jake was already setting up a small camp. The ledge was deeper than Elena had thought, carved back into the rock like a shallow cave. It would protect them from the wind and hide them from view. Jake pulled out a small camping stove and started heating water. "We'll eat, rest for a few hours, then move again before dawn. They'll be searching all night, but they won't think to look up here." Elena watched him work. He moved with such confidence, such competence. She wondered what he'd been like as a Marine. Probably a leader, someone his unit trusted completely. "Jake," she said, "thank you for all of this. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know what else to say." Jake handed her a cup of instant soup. "You don't have to thank me. I'm where I'm supposed to be." "What do you mean?" "I left civilization because I was done fighting. Done trying to fix a broken system, but maybe I was wrong." He looked out at the darkening mountains. Maybe walking away isn't the answer. Maybe the answer is helping people like you, people who tried to do the right thing and got crushed for it. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. Elena had never seen so many stars. In the city, light pollution hid most of them. But here, the sky was filled with millions of points of light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. A reminder of how vast the universe was, how small they were. "Get some sleep," Jake said. "I'll take first watch." Elena wrapped herself in the thermal blanket Jake gave her and closed her eyes. Despite the hard rock beneath her, despite the cold, despite everything, she fell asleep almost immediately. She woke to Jake shaking her shoulder gently. "We need to move now." Elena sat up, groggy and confused. It was still dark. "What's wrong?" "Listen." In the distance, Elena heard voices. Lots of voices. And the sound of multiple snowmobiles. "They brought reinforcements," Jake said grimly. "A lot of them. They're doing a systematic search of the entire area." Elena felt panic rising. "How many?" "Sounds like at least a dozen. Maybe more." Jake was already packing their gear. "We need to move fast and quiet. They're between us and the ranger station now. So what do we do?" Jake looked at her, and for the first time, Elena saw worry in his eyes. "We improvise." They climbed down from the ledge in darkness, Jake going first to guide Elena's feet. Her muscles screamed in protest. She'd barely slept, and now they were moving again. At the bottom, Jake studied the terrain. The voices were getting closer. Flashlight beams swept through the trees. "This way," Jake whispered, leading her away from the sounds. But they hadn't gone 50 yards when they heard more voices ahead. They were surrounded. Jake pulled Elena behind a cluster of boulders. They crouched there, barely breathing, as flashlight beams played across the snow around them. They were heading for the ranger station, a voice said. Close. Too close. We've got men there now. They're trapped. Victor wants them alive, another voice replied. The woman especially. But Morrison, Victor said if he resists, put him down. Elena felt sick. Jake could die because of her, because he'd chosen to help her. She looked at Jake, about to tell him to leave her, to save himself. But his expression stopped her. He was thinking, calculating, planning. This was what he'd been trained for. Impossible situations. Desperate odds. He leaned close to her ear. There's one route they won't expect. It's dangerous. Really dangerous. But it's our only shot. What route? Jake pointed up. At the steep mountain slope above them, the one that looked like certain death. We go up, he whispered, all the way to the summit. Then down the other side. It'll take us out of their search area completely. Elena looked at the mountain. It was nearly vertical in places, covered in ice and snow. One slip would mean a fatal fall, but staying here meant capture. Or worse. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Jake squeezed her hand once. Then they started climbing. Behind them, the voices grew louder as the hunters closed in on their hiding spot. Ahead was a mountain that looked impossible to climb. Elena didn't look back. She just climbed, one handhold at a time, one step closer to freedom, or one step closer to the edge. The mountain was trying to kill them. That was the only thought in Elena's mind as she clung to the frozen rock face, her fingers so cold she could barely feel them anymore. Every few feet, Jake would find a route and guide her up, his voice steady even though they were climbing in almost total darkness. Don't think about how high we are, Jake said quietly. Just focus on the next grip. Nothing else exists except the rock in front of you. Elena wanted to tell him that was impossible. Below them, flashlight beams swept through the forest. The hunters were everywhere, combing through the area where they'd been hiding just minutes ago. If Elena and Jake had waited even a few seconds longer, they would have been caught. Her foot slipped on a patch of ice. Elena's stomach dropped as she swung out, holding on with just her hands. A small cry escaped her lips before she could stop it. Quiet, Jake hissed. He was beside her in an instant, his hand steadying her. Feel with your left foot. There's a ledge. Elena found it, pressed herself against the mountain, and tried to calm her racing heart. That was too close. Way too close. They kept climbing. Minutes felt like hours. Elena's arms shook with exhaustion. Her legs felt like they would give out at any moment. But Jake kept them moving, always finding the next handhold, always knowing where to go, even in the darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a flat area. Not the summit, but a wide shelf that cut across the mountain face. Elena collapsed onto it, gasping. We can't stop long, Jake said, but he was breathing hard too. This climb was pushing even him to his limits. 5 minutes. Then we keep moving. Elena lay on the cold stone and looked up at the stars. Her whole body hurt. She'd never been this exhausted in her entire life. But they'd made it. They'd climbed out of the trap. How much further? She asked. Another hour to the summit. Then we start down the other side. Jake was drinking water, rationing it carefully. The descent will be harder, steeper, but once we're down, we'll be in a different valley. They won't have men there. An hour. Elena didn't know if she had an hour left in her, but she'd made it this far. She couldn't quit now. They started climbing again. The angle got steeper. The handholds became smaller, harder to find. Ice coated everything, making every movement treacherous. Elena's gloves were torn, her hands bleeding beneath them. But she kept climbing. Jake was above her, testing each route before bringing her up. He'd found a rope in his pack and tied them together so if one of them fell, the other could catch them. Elena tried not to think about what would happen if they both fell. Then she heard it. A sound that made her blood turn to ice, cracked the sound of rock breaking. Jake! Elena screamed. Above her, a section of the mountain face gave way. Jake was on it. Elena watched in horror as he dropped, the rope between them going taut. She braced herself, gripping her handholds with everything she had. The impact nearly ripped her off the mountain. Elena's shoulders felt like they were being torn from their sockets. Her fingers slipped, but she dug in harder, screaming from the effort. Below her, Jake dangled from the rope, spinning slowly. He'd fallen about 15 feet. In the dim light, Elena could see blood on his face. "Jake," she called down. "Are you okay?" For a terrible moment, he didn't answer. Then she heard him groan. Yeah, I'm okay." His voice was strained. "Can you hold me?" "I don't know," Elena said honestly. Her arms were shaking. She could feel her grip weakening. "I'm not strong enough." "Yes, you are," Jake called up. "Listen to me. You've climbed further than you ever thought you could. You've survived things that would have broken most people. You're strong enough." "I know you are." Elena closed her eyes and held on. Her muscles screamed. Her hands felt like they were on fire, but she held on. "There's a ledge to my right," Jake said. He was looking around, assessing, even while hanging from a rope. "I'm going to swing toward it. When I do, you'll feel the rope pull. Hold tight." "Okay," Elena managed to say. She felt Jake swing once, twice, then a hard pull on the rope. Elena's fingers slipped half an inch. She cried out but managed to hold on. Another pull. Then the rope went slack. "I'm on the ledge," Jake called up. "You can let go of the rope tension now." Elena did, and her arms nearly gave out from relief. She was shaking so hard she could barely move. "Elena," Jake's voice came from below. "That was incredible." "You just saved my life." She wanted to laugh, but it came out as a sob. Or even then. It took them another 20 minutes to find a safe route back together. When Jake finally pulled himself up beside her, Elena could see the gash on his forehead from where he'd hit the rock. Blood had frozen in his beard. "You need first aid," she said. "Later, we need to keep moving." But Jake was moving slower now. The fall had hurt him more than he was letting on. Elena could see it in the way he favored his left leg. "You're injured." "It's not bad, just bruised." Jake started climbing again, but Elena could see the pain in every movement. They reached the summit just as the first light of dawn began to gray the sky. From the top, Elena could see for miles in every direction, mountains everywhere. And far below in the valley they'd left, she could see lights. Lots of lights. The hunters were still searching. "We made it," Elena whispered. "Halfway," Jake corrected. "Now we go down." The descent was a nightmare. The eastern face of the mountain was even steeper than the side they'd climbed. And now they could see what they were doing, which made it worse somehow. Elena could see exactly how far they'd fall if they slipped. Jake led them down carefully, but he was slowing. His left leg was definitely injured. Every time he put weight on it, Elena could see him wince. "Jake, we need to stop. You need to rest." "Can't. They'll figure out what we did eventually. They'll send men around to this valley. We need distance." They kept descending, slower now, more carefully. Jake was breathing hard, sweating despite the cold. Elena stayed close, ready to help if he fell. Halfway down, they reached a section of smooth rock covered in ice. There were no handholds, no obvious route. Jake studied it for a long time. "Too long. What's wrong?" Elena asked. "We can't climb down this section. It's too sheer. Too icy." He looked around, searching for another route. "We're going to have to go around. It'll add hours to our descent, hours they didn't have." Elena could see it in Jake's face. He was at the end of his strength. The fall had taken more out of him than he'd admitted. "What if we slid?" Elena suggested. Jake looked at her. "What, like sledding?" "We could slide down this section. Control our speed with our feet and hands. That's insane. We could hit a rock. We could go over a drop we can't see." We could save hours," Elena interrupted. "And you need medical attention. The longer we take, the worse your leg gets." Jake looked at the ice slope, then back at Elena. She could see him calculating odds, weighing risks. Finally, he nodded. "We go together. Stay close. If one of us starts sliding too fast, the other can help slow us down." They positioned themselves at the top of the icy slope. Jake wrapped the rope around them both, creating a link. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3, they pushed off. The world became a blur of white. They slid down the ice faster than Elena had expected, the wind whipping past her face. She dug in with her boots, trying to control her speed, but it was like trying to stop a runaway train. Beside her, Jake was doing the same, using his body to steer them away from rocks. They hit a bump and went airborne for a heart-stopping second before landing hard and continuing down. Elena's eyes watered from the wind. She couldn't see where they were going. She just held on and prayed. Then suddenly the slope leveled out. They skidded across flat snow and finally came to a stop. Elena lay there stunned. They'd just slid down about 300 feet of mountain in less than a minute. It was the craziest thing she'd ever done. Jake started laughing. actually laughing. That was either brilliant or the stupidest idea ever. I'm not sure which. Elena found herself laughing too. Crazy, relieved laughter. They were alive. Against all odds, they were still alive. But when Jake tried to stand, he collapsed with a cry of pain. Elena rushed to him. His left leg was bad. Really bad. The ankle was swelling even through his boot. It might be broken, Jake said through gritted teeth. The slide. I hit something. Elena felt panic rising. They were on the far side of the mountain now, away from the hunters. But Jake could barely walk. How were they supposed to make it to safety? We need to splint it, Elena said, forcing herself to think clearly. Do you have anything in your pack? Together they fashioned a crude splint from sticks and rope. Jake talked her through it, his voice strained with pain. When they finished, he tried to stand again. This time he managed it, but he couldn't put much weight on the leg. I can walk, he insisted. Slowly, but I can walk. They started down again. Jake leaned heavily on a walking stick he'd cut from a branch. Their pace was agonizing. Every few steps, Jake had to stop and breathe through the pain. Elena felt helpless. Jake had saved her life multiple times, and now she could barely help him walk. She'd never felt more useless. Stop it, Jake said. Stop what? Blaming yourself. I can see it on your face. He adjusted his grip on the stick. I made my choices. I don't regret them. But you're hurt because of me. I'm hurt because a rock broke and I fell. That's not on you. He started walking again. Besides, you held a rope supporting my full body weight. You saved my life when I fell. You got us down a mountain I wasn't sure we could descend. You're not useless, Elena. You're a survivor. By midday, they reached the valley floor. They'd made it down the mountain, but Jake was in bad shape. His face was gray with pain. His injured leg was dragging. The ranger station, Elena said. How far? 5 miles. Maybe 6. Jake's voice was weak. Through those woods. 5 miles might as well have been 50. Jake could barely walk 100 feet without stopping. You need to go without me, Jake said. Absolutely not. Elena, be reasonable. I'm slowing you down. You can move faster without me. Get to the ranger station. There's a radio there. Call for help. I'm not leaving you. You have to. No, Elena said firmly. You didn't leave me when I was freezing in your cabin. You didn't leave me when the hunters came. You didn't leave me when we were trapped on that cliff. I'm not leaving you now. Jake looked at her and something passed between them. Understanding. Respect. Trust. Okay, he said quietly. Then we do this together. They walked. Slowly, painfully, but they walked. Elena supported Jake as much as she could, taking some of his weight. They moved through the forest like 2 wounded soldiers retreating from a battlefield. The sun was setting when they finally saw it. The ranger station, a small wooden building abandoned and weathered but standing solid. We made it, Elena whispered. They stumbled to the door. It was locked, but Jake had the strength left to kick it open. Inside, it was dusty and cold, but there were supplies, blankets, canned food, and most importantly, an old radio. Elena got Jake settled and then went to the radio. Her hands shook as she turned it on. Static filled the room. This is Elena Rodriguez, she said into the microphone. We're at the old ranger station in Lost Valley. We need immediate medical assistance. Please, is anyone listening? More static, then a voice. This is Park Ranger Station 12. We read you. Help is on the way. Stay where you are. Elena wanted to cry from relief. Help was coming. They were going to make it. She turned to tell Jake, but he'd passed out from exhaustion and pain. Elena covered him with blankets and checked his leg. The swelling was worse. He needed a hospital. She sat beside him and waited for rescue, looking out the window at the darkening forest. Somewhere out there, the hunters were still searching. But here, in this moment, they were safe.